but it was a lot of thinking. You know, I'm really down on software patents, especially, you know, you read about these things like 3 developers were having a conversation in front of an attorney, and at the end of the evening, he said, "Oh, I heard 17 patentable ideas." No, that's not patentable. You know, in my opinion, it needs to be something that it takes a lot of work to do, not something where you just go, "Oh, I'll do the equivalent of X only using a computer." Okay, this is big, and this is kind of moving towards the typical conference angle here. You got to think on a really long timeline for what it is that you're building, right? I say you better think on a 20-year timeline. We've been at FlightAware already for 8 years. Boy, I didn't expect that, you know? But I've already been doing it for 8 years, so if my timeline was 10 years, what does that mean? Like in 2 years, I'd be saying, let's throw everything away and rewrite it or something like that. It's not going to happen. Whatever platform, whatever language you decide to build your app in, if you're going to be successful, you're going to be on that language maybe for 20 years. That has a couple of important impacts. One is, if you develop it in the new hotness of the day, I guarantee within a few years that won't be the new hotness, and you'll be looking for like Rails developers or whatever. So I took a shot at Rails there too. This is very interesting stuff. So we get all this telemetry, we get all this data, and we save every piece of data that we get before we process it. And that has worked out really good because our understanding of the data was incomplete. And we drew these conclusions based on what we saw, and we were wrong. And if we had only kept what we decided and not what we were told, we would have lost fidelity. We wouldn't have any ability to go back and like fix the problem or whatever. So if you have the capacity and $100 for 3 terabytes of disk, you do have the capacity most of the time. Record your raw data before you interpret it. This is huge. Avoid ground-up rewrites like the plague. I know as a young programmer myself, I wanted to throw stuff away rather than figure it out, you know. And it's back to the power company. It's like, oh, this logging subsystem, it's not working right. It's just a piece of crap. The first statement is a go-to in the program. You know, I just want to throw this all away and rewrite it. And my boss says, no. He says, no. Fix the bug. Then maybe I'll let you rewrite it. But first, fix the bug. So I sulked all afternoon. And then the next morning, I had the bug fixed by noon. And my desire to rewrite the program went to 0. So I say, especially the young programmer would rather throw stuff away and create it from scratch. And that's almost always a really bad idea. And here's why. You don't understand what you're throwing away. You don't actually understand that program. You could have read it, you could have read the documentation, but you don't understand the whole program. You just understand kind of what it's supposed to do. You don't understand how complicated it is, and you don't understand all the problems that the people who wrote that program solved, many of which may be very subtle, that you're going to recreate as bugs with your new rewrite. So, in my opinion, rewriting from scratch, rare epic events where massive modernization is required. Like what? If your application was written for the ModComp computer in the 1970s, running the ModComp operating system, then when ModComp went out of business, you are going to at least port all your stuff to a new machine, and that might be a rewrite. So getting away, and for the vendors, right, getting away from writing the OS and assembler, stuff like that, that is an epic event where rewriting makes sense. So getting off of proprietary hardware, look where I say that happened, in the 1980s. It's probably where most people moved off of proprietary hardware. Getting away from something horrible, like doing systems programming in Fortran, that was probably the 1980s. That's moved to C. And then, you know, maybe you're just like, we've run out of grunt with the text files and the stuff. We want to use a SQL database. Okay? Even then, I would say try to port and try to leverage what you've already got. But my point is then, in a 40-year career, 2 or 3 times, it made sense to rewrite. Not for me necessarily, but for things that I saw that were happening. And my last remark, history is littered with the corpses of solid companies that committed suicide by committing to a ground-up rewrite. Yeah, and even a lot of little internet companies and stuff that were really good. Just, oh, we're going to rewrite all this in Java. Okay, fashion. I looked this up. Fashion, a popular trend, especially in styles of dress and ornament or manners of behavior. Well, how does that apply to programming languages? Well, it totally does. There is fashion in programming languages. The nature of fashion is it's unpredictable and capricious, right? This year, collars are up. Next year, hemlines are down. I don't know who decides all that, but it's certainly not obvious what is going to happen next. So I say this main thing. Fashion is a sort of epiphenomena of a community of thinkers, publicizers, followers, and fools. Right? So you get all these people together and they're like, this is the greatest thing ever. And I wrote 8 queens in it, or I generated a Fibonacci sequence, or I wrote tic-tac-toe, and it was great. So this is the future. Fashion applies to programming languages. Languages go out of fashion through no fault of their own. The language doesn't suddenly become incapable of doing something, and the thing that's being promoted as better is not like, oh my God, this is so much better. It's just, yeah, maybe it's better, right? Proponents of the new hotness always oversell. They oversell the capabilities, the strength, the maturity, the usefulness, and the applicability of the language. The one that's on my mind right now is Node, which isn't really a language, it's an environment, right? But, it's like, this is going to be awesome. Everything's going to be totally event-driven. Like, you're going to open a file and get a callback when it's open, and you're going to get a callback when data is available, and you're going to open a socket. And obviously, we can do that in Tickle, right? We get callbacks when sockets come in. We've been doing that for decades. It kicks ass, right? But also, we can write in a hybrid style. If I'm willing to not respond on the socket for a second or two, and I'm not losing that stuff, it's all queuing, right? I can go open a file and read it and close it. I can do things procedurally. Procedural is good. Procedural means I'm like 5 levels down in the stack, and all these calls, I validated the input, I've done all this stuff, versus if it's all event-driven, it's like I've woken up anew. Who am I? What was I doing? Who are you? What is this? And it's hard. It is hard to write those programs and get them right. And the guys who are saying Node is the greatest thing ever are not saying, hey, gee, this doing every single thing event-driven is hard. They're saying this is the way to do it. If you don't get it, you're an idiot. Okay? So they are advocates. And an advocate advocates for something. So even if they pretend to be otherwise, I have dispassionately examined Node. I have dispassionately examined Java. I have dispassionately examined whatever, and it's terrific. And it's like, have you actually built something real with it? Oh yeah, sure. All right. Immature development environments, and I'm speaking broadly, like the language, the environment, the machine, they're schedule killers or business killers. Give you an example. Let's say you're developing in Tickle, and you're just writing Tickle code and everything's great, and you do something and Tickle dumps core. All right? Or you're a developer, right? You're a junior developer, you're a new guy, who never learned C or whatever, now has a core dump to deal with. And so now I'm no longer working at the level of Tickle, I'm working underneath the level of Tickle trying to find out what happened. Well, what's cool about Tickle, it almost never crashes, right? But these other things crash, and as soon as a layer below the layer I'm working at is malfunctioning, I'm stopped, right? If the hardware is malfunctioning, the machine's unusable, right? If the file system is losing files, what is the impact on the schedule of that, right? If the worst thing, a syntactically correct program produces incorrect results. How hard is it to find and understand and get that problem fixed? This is a powerful argument against bleeding edge stuff if you're trying to build something big. Okay, hey, there was a time when Tickle was bleeding edge. I went and met John at Berkeley, and this is in like 91, and he said, yeah, I'm trying to find a bug. Wild is leaking memory, right? Wild has not leaked memory for 22 years, you know, and you can use Wild with complete confidence that it will not leak memory. And I also give huge accolades to John for the tests and the approach of, oh, you found a bug, write a test, then fix the bug, then have the test work. Have it not work, fix the bug, have it work. And a bunch of y'all have followed that. And the result is, even that, you know, the guys who promote, you know, like on Hacker News or something, right? You know, if Tickle gets referenced, usually it's a swipe. And usually it doesn't get referenced at all. But then you'll come across some guy who's a mover in some environment that's actually a competitor to Tickle saying, I have examined the source code to Tickle and it is the finest program I have ever seen in my life. It happened like 2 months ago. It was really cool. I enjoyed that. And then the last thing here, it is extremely valuable to have the source code to the entire stack. There is nothing worse than, you know, having some purchased middleware layer that's binary or something and it's not working right and you can't figure out why. You don't have any insight to the other side of it, right? I make the call to the middleware layer and it crashes or whatever. Now I'm trying to talk to the vendor and I'm trying to get them to fix it. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're moving out of that. I actually saw a company have that happen. They were using this middleware layer doing this home automation stuff, and Motorola, big company, and they're trying to get Motorola to fix these bugs in the middleware, and they're trying, and then Motorola goes, yeah, we're moving out of that. And these guys have done an incredible amount of work. So you know, it's not that often that you need to look into the operating system, but if you're running Linux for BSD, you have the source code. You can look at the driver, you know? I don't want to, and I try to avoid it, but I've done it, and it's very handy. All right, the pluses of Tickle. It's extremely stable. It's featureful. It's reliable. It has a huge library of packages. You know, it kind of gets on your mind a little bit. It's like, well, you don't hear that much about Tickle. I'm not sure how the community's doing. I sure hope this XML thing works. Yeah, it does. It works great. You know, oh, look, here's this new thing Kevin wrote. Oh, here's this new thing Andreas wrote. Here's this new thing Hobbs wrote. You know, like, there is a live, vibrant thing, and the old stuff either works or is continually getting improved. So that is, again, if I'm planning for 20-year time frame, I need something that works. All right? And I need something that I can sort of rely on for 20 years. I like to talk about some stuff I'd like to see in Tickle. I like higher performance. You know, JavaScript gets faster with each release. Tickle gets slower. I'd like better capabilities for representing complex data structures, especially like hierarchies of data structures, like you do routinely in C and like you can do pretty routinely in JavaScript. For me, dict is not enough. It doesn't have enough context. Our speed tables thing, they really help, but it's not a first-class Tickle object. It's something that moves data in and out of arrays. It's completely viable. Here's an example. I say, I'm jealous of JavaScript's ability to do this kind of stuff. Bam, look at that. And imagine how you would write this in Tickle. You know, you'd have to set something to square bracket, like that is going to be real hard to write in Tickle, and it's going to be some complicated mess. Even if you do get it on one line, it's not going to read left to right. It's going to read function calling function, invoking output of function, I think that they've got something here that's working really well. And I think I know the reason too, because JavaScript grew up with the DOM, you know, the document object model, a very complicated data structure representing the web page. And so even before JavaScript had objects, it knew how to drive around the DOM, and that kind of led it to a better, I don't know if I should say better, but that led it to being able to kind of represent these complex relationships of data. I partly blame myself for that, because I was so happy to get associative arrays into Tickle that I thought it was handed, all right? Talk about that more in a minute. And this is a small thing, but I think it's cool. You know how you can call a function like a TK, you invoke something and you can say dash variable value, dash variable value, dash variable value. I like to see that for procs in general. You know, when proc has more than like 5 or 6 arguments, it starts getting gross. And it's like, well, you know, I need to add this one other thing. Only under certain circumstances it'll be an optional parameter, but now I already have 2 optional parameters, so now if I want to specify the 3rd thing, but not the 2 optional parameters, I better go ahead and specify whatever the optional parameter defaults to anyway. It's just, it starts to fall apart at more than 5 or 6 arguments. And so I think it would be cool if we could do it. Okay, now can we expand the Tickle user base? And if so, how? This is interesting because the conversations last night, I didn't update the slide. The website is pretty outdated. You know, it's kind of old stuff, right? The wiki is outdated and it really shows. And the, like the numeric node names for the wiki are not friendly for Google and stuff like that. And there's no like home, like Postgres, there's postgresql.org. FreeBSD, there's FreeBSD.org. There's not kind of one place where all the Tickle stuff resides. Now, my last thing, I say not hosting on GitHub seems like we're willfully driving users away. I know there was a reason, I know there were good reasons for using what we used. I don't know what they are, which is why I can go ahead and like take this pot shot. But everybody's into GitHub, almost everybody's into GitHub, and almost everything that's new is kind of on GitHub. And so not being on GitHub just kind of gets us out of the sight of the of a lot of the people that we would like to have start using their language. Okay, so I want to talk just briefly about where things are going. My take on where things are going in the next few years. Scripting languages are going to continue to be really important. Why? Because applications are mostly text. Scripting languages are really good at text. There might be a language that's a little more strongly typed. There may be new scripting languages, but I think you're going to still see scripting languages as being really important. And that's something Jordan and those guys never saw coming, right? Remember that decline in quality American programmer? You missed the internet and you missed, everything basically. I expect that JavaScript will be the dominant scripting language for the next 10 years. Obviously, on the browser, there's no doubt. On the server side, Node is holding it up. If there were just straight up libraries for doing the kind of regular running of programs that you do, like reading files and stuff without all the callbacks, I think JavaScript would get more of a toehold. And I know there's some work on that, but it's not, I don't know, it's not getting any traction. JavaScript has some really nasty words, a couple that just are disgusting. If you instantiate a variable without declaring it as a var in a function, it is global. And that's like PHP, that's ridiculous, that's the reverse. You definitely want to, global variables need to be called out, either as global or with the colon or whatever. Because obviously, all I have to do is forget to say var I, and do I equals whatever, back to Fortran, right? I is still a very popular index variable name, and you've seen tons of PHP security problems related to exactly that. Inadvertent global variables, not just security problems, but just actual operational problems, because some other proc just clobbered my iterator variable. I think that is plain wrong. Okay, another gross thing in JavaScript is the equals and the equals, where basically it's just like, yeah, just use equals, never use equals. And that's what's gross. Okay, so, when I was, obviously you guys asked me to do this like a year ago, so I've been thinking about this for a year. And been working on it off and on for weeks. And at first, it was like, I was really struggling for how to close it, we're not the new hotness anymore, but we kind of never were to begin with, so that's okay. Goodbye, have a great conference. No, there's no end in sight. There is no end. Tickle is healthy. It's not huge, but it's fully healthy, and that you guys are here proves that. Yeah, there's no end in sight. what does it take to keep going? It takes a user community who cares, and it just takes people to take care of it and people to kind of upgrade the most important stuff and keep it working. So there's no end in sight for Tickle. Tickle's viable, and it continues to be viable. And for me, if I was starting something today, I'd probably use that. It's my go-to language, and it has been for over 20 years. A lot of people would look at me and say I'm one note. You know what I mean? Like a musician is one note, they only know how to play one note. And they go, oh, this guy's one note. Well, there's some validity to that. But I haven't thrown away anything in over 20 years. I've sustained 20 years of work in this language and some really good work. And I missed out on some intense butt pain, like all these people who went to Java because it was going to be the greatest thing ever, and then over time, you know, it's fallen out of fashion, not just because of the fashion changes, because everybody goes, well, you know, it's okay, but I'm a lot closer to programming in C or C++ than I am in programming in Tickle or JavaScript or something like that. I haven't selected Perl, but I don't like Perl. And so, how do you hire for a language that isn't hot? Well, you hire for the general ability, and then you make them learn the language. That just works fine. It's no problem. Nobody's complained about it. My guys, they learn Tickle and they really like it. You know, they're kind of aggressive to start with, but I mean, a couple of them have been. Just because they looked on the internet and found some vicious lie that somebody said. But then they get into it and they're like, hey, this is really cool. And so, you know, it continues to win. It continues to win people over. Speaking of hiring, it's really hard to find good people, right? And second chapter last night that in Vancouver, all these companies have gone to Vancouver, and now you're having to compete with Amazon and all these other people. Boy, how do you find people, and how do you find good people? One of our, we were just getting inundated with resumes from people who are absolutely unqualified and for sure never even looked at the job posting. You know, some guy who's a Microsoft certified engineer. I'm not expecting a Microsoft engineer. I'm just saying if that's your thing, you're not. We don't do that at FlightAware. So I get 100 resumes that are that. So we invented this little thing where we have a REST API, and you have to submit to a REST API without a form. So you have to code enough to send us your name and your resume and stuff. And that works really well. That filters out like 95%. So I recommend definitely coming up with like tricks like that. And I don't know if it's a trick, but it's a technique, right? And then you know, you get people in and they interview really well, but then we have a little task, hey, parse this, and they can't or whatever. Boy, when you find, you know, it's the glass half full or glass half empty. Like I've got guys who I've been disappointed with, but I've got some programmers who are just unbelievable. And so my glass is definitely half full. So just to reiterate, you know, this language is viable. I think it would be great to figure out how to kind of expand the awareness of it and expand the people who are using it and get some new wins. It'd be great if some of you guys go out and build some cool businesses or whatever it is you want to do in Tickle. You know, I'm on a 20-year timeline for FlightAware, so I'm in for 12 more years. Yeah. Okay, so Tickle, new and proven? Absolutely. All right. All right, that's what I got. So I've got some time for questions. Any questions? Yeah, Steve.
First of all, I'm going to watch this video again so I can make sure that everything he said sunk. Good job.
Well, thank you. That's good.
You stated you had 3 points of presence for your internet infrastructure.
Yes.
How does that connect back to the database? Do you have replication, or do you just focus on one data center that's hardened and robust?
Yeah, almost all the work gets done in Houston. Dallas is an emergency. Dallas, the development happens in Dallas. Even though we're in Houston, we SSH in Dallas to do a lot of development. And so Dallas is like the contingency thing where we'll jump to Dallas if a hurricane comes to Houston or some kind of disaster. We do replicate a database up there, but it's behind because of the link. It gets behind 30 to 60 seconds, which does not work. You know, if you change your password and then you hit that database server and it's not changed and stuff like that. It's something we're thinking about that we haven't solved. London is a data collection point coming the other way, and it's a cache point. So we don't distribute the database outside of Houston right now. We kind of dodged a bullet. So we had a hurricane, Ike, a few years ago that some of the businesses in Houston, it was unbelievable how bad these power lines were down along an interstate highway. All these buildings for like 3 months had no power. 3 months. Our power was on the whole time. My house, our power was on like 10 minutes. But some of the guys were out for weeks and they loved it. And I just sort of really hate that stuff. But yeah, it's Dallas is an emergency backup, and we don't have a full replica of everything. So if we do have to move to Dallas, we're going to be under reduced circumstances. But I want to say, a couple of things that we did, we created these things we call circuit breakers, where we can dial the site back. We can dial back the refresh rate. We can dial back all these different things. We can turn off photos. We can turn off different parts of the site in order that it function okay. Postgres does have some sort of nasty behaviors when the load exceeds what it can do. It goes into what we call collapse. Where there's just so much lock contention going on that it can't get any work done. And so it's really important to unload it when it happens. And it's really important to buy more database servers before it happens. Something that we're better at. Those database servers, by the way, with 512 gigs and 15K RPM drives, they're like $25 million, which, it's a lot of money, but looking at how it is today, it's not a lot of money. Another thing I think is interesting, for those of you guys who are a little older, like 20 years ago, the average spending on an IT worker was about $10,000 a year. Basically, like they bought us a new PDP-11 for several programmers every couple of years, right? And now the average spending on an IT worker is like $1,000 a year. It's really low. We go ahead and spring for the dual big displays because it's been proven in like 20 studies that if you can see more stuff, you're more effective. Coders really love it. So yeah, thanks. Questions?
Where's your current performance bottleneck? Bottlenecks. The thing that most becomes a problem is the database still. We have 6 database servers. 1 is the primary, 5 are slaves. Some even read queries go to the primary because of the timeliness gap, which is a pain. We were using this middleware called PGPool, which would maintain connections to all the databases, and it would randomly sort of flip from one to the other for the slave. And we were having these problems with the collapse a lot, and that was just very recently we figured out that like this one database server gets really behind and it's hammered. Well, the PG pool doesn't have any communication to know that it's slow or that it's behind, so 25% of the requests it sends to it. So within a minute or two, every process, 1,200 Apache processes were hung up waiting for it. So what we did is kind of like some jet or something that has 4 fuel tanks and 4 engines, but every tank can be cross-fed to all the different engines and everything. We just ripped all that stuff out, and we put one web server goes to one database server, one web server goes to one database server, and we just like sort of plumbed each fuel tank to each engine, and it solved the problem so far, which is pretty cool. Of course, we have 4 web servers and 6 database servers, so we're working on that. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
Why Apache and not Tickle in the first place on the server?
Performance. One thing Apache predates Tickle, and the performance of the Apache is, you can do hundreds of pages a second if it's just straight up. This Tickle, as far as I know, it's single threaded. I know you guys have done some cool stuff, but it's just what we did. We'd written a module for Apache in the 1990s for Tickle, and then evolved to this newer module. So it's just what we do. I think that's what we do. Yeah.
Just curious about what releases of Tickle and iTickle here.
Yeah, we're on Tickle 8.5 still, and iTickle 3.1. So
So there's no evidence from your work that iTickle 4 is a good or not good replacement?
I know we got everything up on 8.6. We had some problems, and then I mean we didn't move to it. We're experimenting with it and stuff. Yeah, it's not. We're just really busy making FlightWire, so getting to the latest switches isn't a priority. All right, I need to wrap it up.
Hey, Mike, do this.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much. You've been a great audience. This is useful, and it was really an honor to have been invited to do this. I was actually pretty scared walking in here. So anyway, thank you all very much.
Thank you very, very much.